It's all good. I like your posters behind you.
Yeah, well, I wrote China and
Nice.
Sword and Sorcerer.
Oh, Sword and the Sorcerer. My goodness me.
Classic posters. Classic films.
Posters. Classic films indeed. Right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
As you said, in a strange way, we've not got a lot to do these days, have we? So we can just chat to each other and talk about movies.
Why not? It's usually good fun.
It's usually good fun. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I know it's obviously a slightly busy time for you because you've got obviously the re-release of Dog Soldiers, and you've got your other film, I think, at Fright Fest soon or coming out soon, or
yeah. So it's a busy month. Today, in fact, is our US premiere at Beyond Fest later tonight. So at a drive-in, which is going to be interesting. I've never been to a drive-in before, so we'll do a drive-in premiere here. Then we've got Fright Fest October 23rd. There's a couple of other UK festivals after that. Leeds is going to show Reckoning, and Grimfest and Abattoir. So they're both going to show Reckoning as well. So that's really cool. Really happy about that. And then Dog Soldiers is coming out at the same time. So busy month. It's great.
Yeah. Are you going to get to go to the drive-in? Are they doing something where you're able to turn up or able to see it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's why it's in a drive-in, so that we can go. Yeah, it's going to be surreal. My first drive-in experience going to a premiere of my own movie. I don't know. I can't wait, to see what it's like.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's been like quite a few kind of success stories in the States with drive-ins in terms of like, especially some horror movies. They seem to have done, audiences seem to want to go and see stuff at the drive-ins, especially if they're scary stuff.
Yeah. Which was more of them, I suppose. But it's great that they've had a revival because of this, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, Dog Soldiers is coming out again soon, and I really love this film, so I'm excited to chat to you, even if it's only for a few minutes. I was trying to recollect. I remember seeing it in the cinema with my friends in 2002, and we loved it because we were obsessed with werewolf movies and stuff. But obviously, your movie was werewolves mixed with army and guns and everything else. Has it sunk in over the years? Over the 18 years now that it's become this kind of, it's got this cult following, but it's become maybe bigger than you had anticipated when you first made it?
I suppose because it's been a very, very gradual process. I mean, 18 years. Who would have believed back then that people would still be talking about it so fondly now, and getting so excited about the Blu-ray release and things like that. I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what we managed to achieve. Absolutely, I never saw it coming, and we just I basically set out to make a film that I wanted to watch more than anything, and I think everybody else joined in with that kind of sort of ethos behind it of like, okay, this would be a great film just to watch when we get back from the pub, and that was the target audience for me as well. It's like, okay, the post-pub Friday night audience, or squaddies in Iraq watching it, which actually, as it turned out, they loved it over there and watched it all the time, which again made me super proud. But 18 years later, I didn't know I was still going to be doing interviews about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we must have. I think I probably was with my friends post pub. I think that was probably it probably was a Friday night movie. It's kind of a perfect Friday night movie after the pub. But this was your directorial, that feature film debut that you wrote and directed. So in terms of like getting it going, was it a long process back then to get it going? Because obviously the cinema's changed quite a lot in the interim, but
it was a crazy long process getting it going. I mean, I first conceived the idea in 1995, and we didn't shoot it until 2001. So yeah, it was a 6-year process of there was a few false starts along the way. I think at one point we were thinking about shooting it on the Isle of Man. At one point we were going to shoot it in Canada. I mean, we went to the Isle of Man and scouted locations, but one way or another they all fell through. While I was kind of rewriting the script constantly and just trying to make it better every time, and eventually and going around like every possible source of finance that we could like think of. It's in the UK, and all the production companies in the UK were like, it's not our cup of tea. We don't do this kind of thing. Horror, that's not our thing. And that was one complaint. The other complaint was it's just too ambitious for a first-time feature. But I kind of took all that with a pinch of salt. It was like, okay, whatever, that's fine. I think of all the crimes to be accused of, like, in film, it's ambition is like, I'll take that as a compliment. So, eventually, we managed to put the right team together. We got Chris Fig on board, who's, the producer of Hellraiser. And I think that really helped us. And then, we had the Victor Film Company selling the film. And one way or another, we eventually found our finance, a combination of the Luxembourg Film Fund and a spinach magnate from Arkansas called David Allen, who ultimately financed it out of his own pocket. And so that's how we got it done in the end.
That's cool. I remember seeing you. This is me showing how much I've watched. I remember seeing you on the Video Nasties documentary, and you talked about when you were a kid that you watched some of those movies, and they were kind of ingrained in your brain and everything else. Were they kind of indirectly responsible for you wanting to start with a horror movie? Were they kind of they influenced you enough that you thought your first film was going to be a horror movie?
Definitely, definitely influenced by all that. It was also that horror seemed like the most accessible genre to start in. For like low budget filmmaking, but also so many of my favorite directors began in horror. So I kind of thought, yeah, that just seems logical step for me. I didn't necessarily want to just do horror for the rest of my life. Action, I think, is the key thing that links all of my movies in a way. But I do love horror so much, and it was just a logical first thing to do. Of course, I tried Werewolves, which was the most illogical thing to do, but whatever.
And obviously, I mean, werewolf movies. Obviously, people will think of the classic movies from the 80s. Obviously, American Werewolf in London and The Howling, obviously being the two that people, and Company of Wolves, I guess, as well. Were they kind of things for you as well when you were a kid? That they, especially, I guess, for me, obviously, American Werewolf in London is one of my favorite movies. I just wonder whether that was part of the reason why you thought, werewolves is something.
Yeah,
tackle.
I always thought that werewolves were like the best monster. I was never really into vampires, and zombies are fine, but they hadn't really made a comeback then. And those two films, well, actually, those three films, the physical transformation effects in Company of Wolves, the werewolves themselves in The Howling, and then obviously like everything in American Werewolf in London, particularly the transformation sequence, whatever, just like was really, it buried itself right in here, and it was like I need to somehow do a werewolf movie. I didn't really know how. And then combining that with soldier movies, which was also a passion. So,
yeah, and I one of the things I love about the movie was that it's you used kind of physical effects, and that you had people kind of in the suits and all that kind of stuff. But you made again, I've always wanted to ask you this: did you purposely sidestep the transformation? Did you purposely shoot it in a way where you see kind of the early stages cut away and then cut back to it, because I guess it's expensive or just such a taxing thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I knew we didn't have the time or the money to take on American Werewolf, which is kind of it still remains the definitive werewolf transformation sequence, all practical, just amazing. We certainly didn't have the ability to do that. The only other option was like some really bad CG morph effect or something like that, which was pretty much where the technology was at that time. And I thought, no, I just refused to do that because that's going to look really bad. So I went for the Carry On Screaming route of fall behind the furniture and come up as a werewolf. That was my inspiration there.
Carry On Screaming, really? That my I've seen a lot of the Carry On movies because my dad absolutely loves them. But that's I've never heard that before. I never heard that was a thing.
Well,
before.
Carry On
That's really
Screaming
cool.
is like Carry On Screaming was like one of those things. Like it's a ridiculous comedy now, but like when you see it when you're like 5, it actually has some stuff that was quite scary, and it was made really well. It's like they made it the same production values. I think they used a lot of sets and things like that, so the production values are really good in it. And now, of course, it's just hilarious and stupid and wonderful. But yeah, I was like, how am I going to do the transformation sequence? And I remembered, who is it? It's Jim Dale. Turning into a werewolf, and he literally he takes the potion and he like falls behind the furniture, and then he pops up and he's like more hairy, and then he goes back down again, and then he comes up and he's even more hairy, and it's like, okay, let's just do that. Let's just do a parody of that. That's all we can do, and it's not, and it was also the thing for me was like, this isn't a transformation movie. It isn't a Curse of the Werewolf movie. This is about just the werewolves themselves as like an enemy, something to be fought.
Yeah. Did you always envision, because obviously John Landis did it where he did the kind of the Hound from Hell, whereas yours are very, they're I can't remember the name, but obviously on hind legs, as it were. They're still human form. Was that something that you always wanted to do?
Absolutely, it was always in my head, and I think that the Howling was massive inspiration to this as well. To my mind, werewolves should be on 2 legs because that's the humanity part of them, and I think making them more human makes them more terrifying. So I mean, that was my thinking on it.
Yeah. And in terms of you shooting it, obviously, I guess so you talked about the financing and stuff. Was this something that you had to shoot quite quickly, or was it something that you did have a little bit of time to make it how you wanted to make it?
It's hard to say. I'm trying to remember. I think we had 5 weeks to shoot it. But so I guess it was pretty quick considering it's an action movie. But there were some days where we were just rattling through stuff and we were doing like 40 setups a day. And because we were just in one room just blowing stuff up, or people jumping around left, right, and center, and werewolves popping in through windows and things like that. We kind of got through a lot of material there. But for the most part, I'm trying to think actually, I think we only had one camera, except for a couple of scenes where we blew stuff up and we had a couple of cameras. But that set was pretty tight, so there wasn't much room to have 2 cameras, even if we wanted to. But we moved fast, and we did. It was all shot on 16mm as well, and that kind of helped us just to be sort of very light and maneuverable with the camera equipment and everything. Everything's like half the weight and size of 35mm, so and maybe that helped us go faster. I don't know.
Did you, in your script, did you write the fetch line, or was that something improvised? Because I always loved that line. I thought it kind of matched the movie's tone perfectly.
Fetch was in the script. There's a couple of things that weren't. Like Sean improvised a couple of lines. Sausages wasn't in the script. The fake punch where he hits him and he like says, gets up and says, "No, hit me properly, you pussy." That was Sean improvising. And I think if everybody like had some improvisation or whatever that they threw at me at some point, and they were all great. So they got into the characters so much. They loved it.
It looks like they were having fun with that. That's one of those lines I just absolutely went.
They were having too much fun.
Too much fun. Did they ever? Because obviously you did the Descent, and that had a sequel. Did they ever come to you about doing a sequel to this, or were you kind of quite protective of it in the sense that it was just you wanted to tell the one story that you wanted?
I'd always had in mind ideas for a sequel, but weirdly, the people who ultimately kind of financed it and owned it decided not to come back to me for it, and went to try to go other ways, which didn't work out. But we'll see. Maybe I would love to revisit it at some point. I think it's like there's something more in that world. Obviously, all the characters are dead except Cooper, so it's like how to find something that's a similar tone, but within that world. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go back there sometime.
Yeah, and do you think there's a reason why there's never been kind of a new kind of definitive kind of werewolf movie? Because they've tried the CGI route with like the Wolfman and Van Helsing and all these things. It just doesn't ever work. I never felt like it works. Do you think there's a reason why someone's not gone back to the well to make another like a proper good werewolf movie?
I think there's been some really great smaller werewolf movies. I mean, the bigger ones like Underworld and things like that, as you say, very heavily reliant on CG, and it kind of dates quite quickly. But there's a movie called Late Phases, which has a really funky practical werewolf in it. There's a new one actually just coming out now. What's it called? The Wolf of Snowy Hollow or something like that, which looks like it's got a practical werewolf in it, which looks good.
Is that the Jim Cummings movie? Is it Jim Cummings? I think I've seen the trailer. I think I saw the trailer. I think
yes,
it's Jim
Cummings. Robert Forster, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Movie. Yeah.
That looks great fun. I do like the look of that. So yeah, there's they're out there. They're few and far between, but they are out there. But it's difficult. I think that's the problem with like zombies are a hell of a lot easier to pull off cheaply, and vampires as well. But werewolves, there's kind of no version where it's like easy and cheap. It's like whether you try and go CG or practical, it's never easy.
Yeah. And Wolf Cop. I just remembered Wolf Cop. That was good fun.
Wolf Cop. There you go.
I just finally before you go, I just wanted to ask you about The Reckoning. Obviously, it's your new movie that's coming out, and people seem to be quite excited for it. Was it enjoyable to go back to a movie like this after you've made over the years you've made kind of bigger movies and stuff like that? Was it good to go back to something that was slightly smaller? You had a bit more control over, if you like.
In many ways, it was like a breath of fresh air, just to get back and just throw yourself like where everything is 100% creative, because we didn't have money to rely on. I'd done Hellboy, which like where it had like all the money in the world, but like zero creative control, so it was like the most miserable experience of my life. And I think, you know, ultimately the film shows that. Whereas this one, it was the flip side, where I had 100% creative control and no money. But you know, we still pulled something off, though, which I'm incredibly proud, and looks more expensive than it was. And you know, you know, I think that's a real kind of boon for me. But it was just a pleasure to sort of try to think my way out of situations creatively and come up with creative solutions to problems. I think that energizes you as a filmmaker.
Yeah. And what's it? I haven't. I've seen the poster, but what's it? What's the general premise of it? Because I'm excited to see what it's about.
Well, the ironic part is that it's set during the Great Plague,
Oh, okay.
in 1665, and it deals with witch hunts at that time, and a woman who's falsely accused of being a witch, or is she? Uh, accused of being a witch and goes to trial, and I was interested in exploring like all the you know what these poor women had to go through, and there was a lot of them. There was like 500,000 women like were persecuted as witches. You know, not in that particular year, but like throughout that period, for a crime which doesn't actually exist, really. Like, you know, they weren't really flying around on broomsticks and talking to their cats. Well, they might be talking to their cats. I don't know about that, but I don't think their cats were talking to them. Anyway, whatever. But that's the point. Is like it's like such a crime against humanity, and I kind of wanted to do something about that.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to seeing it because it's at Fry Fest in a couple of weeks. So I look
It
forward
is
to
indeed.
seeing it. Very, very good.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. I do love
You're
Dog
welcome.
Soldiers massively, so I look forward to picking up my new Blu-ray when it comes out.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Stay safe.
All right.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey, you guys!